This week on Behind the Pulpit, Pastor Bob and Pastor Dave have returned from the Colson Conference in Dallas. They come back bearing many fun stories about their times in Texas.
It's not going to happen. Driven to Dallas. I had no idea where I was going. And Dave's over here on his phone teaching a class.
He's taking in the glory of Texas. And I'm starting the class on my phone. Like, hey, good evening, students. Professor Henschel, so sorry about this. I have no slides. I have, no background.
No charts.
I couldn't share my charts.
Today we are joined by one of our new world partners, Steve Anderson, who is here to tell us a little bit about his ministry in Ecuador.
We got connected with ministry called Lebensel, which is a German-based organization that's now rooted in the U.S. So we just share with them kind of our heart for missions and ministry. They were talking with us, and they gave us a couple options. One was in Zambia, and one was in Ecuador. And we were praying about it. We met through FaceTime the missionaries that were down in Ecuador and decided to risk it and do a short-term trip to Ecuador.
And along with all your favorite segments, we will highlight Noah's sermon on Luke chapter 18 in the context of being courageous in your faith.
But it's this picture of us just persistently coming to God, trusting that this widow, giving us the example, trusting him that he can do what he says he can do. And I think that's the question about the end that Jesus is asking. Will he find faith? Do you have the faith to keep coming to him in prayer, or do you just give up?
Wherever you may be watching or listening to this today, we hope you're having a wonderful day. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's edition of Behind the Pulpit.
Hey there, welcome to Behind the Pulpit for, what is this today? June 3rd. It's June. The first Behind the Pulpit for June. It's June 3rd, 2024. We're glad you're joining us. Hey, if you're watching us for the first time, go and like us on YouTube? Subscribe on YouTube.
Both.
Like this thing. Make a comment. Tell us what you think.
YouTube.
We need more comments. People need to be commenting more on Behind the Pulpit. And but subscribe to our channel. We would love to have you. My name is Bob Urbig. I'm one of the pastors here at Millington, and I am joined over to the left by I mentioned today, Dave and I are looking like Mormon missionaries. We never wear white shirts, and Today
we have a burning in our bosom.
We do.
Yeah. Good to be with you, Bob. We're back from Dallas. I got home at 1:30 and got to bed, and here I am back again.
I tell you, it is like Jesus might be coming back if Dave is going to bed at 1:30 in the morning.
It's a rare occasion. I do not see that hour very
Joseph
frequently.
Smith might be here too, so you never know.
That's true. That's true. Collab is going to collide with the earth. But anyway, so we are going to be telling you stories about our Dallas conference. But before we get there, we want to introduce our guest. To my left, we have
Steven Anderson. Good to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yes, all right. Clown of applause. Yes, Steve.
Welcome, Steve.
Steve is one of our new world partners, so we're going to be spotlighting him after we tell our conference stories. So feel free to jump in on these stories. It's going to be we're unveiling it for the first time here. It's going to be fun.
Awesome, man.
We're interested to hear about your ministry and what you're doing, and how people can pray for you and partner with you. So thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Welcome, Steve.
Awesome. All right, so to kick it off, so Dave and I this weekend, and we have to start this way. We went to the Colson Center National Conference, which that is, yes, named after Chuck Colson. He's got the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, and they now have a national conference they've been doing. Used to be called the Wilberforce Weekend. I did their Colson Fellows program 2 years ago, which was highly beneficial. I would recommend it. Maybe we'll be doing an associate program here. I cannot confirm nor deny in the next few years. We'll see how that goes. But this conference was excellent. But we have some stories, Pastor Dave, don't we? Where should we start with these stories?
Well, we started in Dallas, Texas, and remember, the stars are bright and
we did not start in Dallas, Texas.
Not the Dallas Stars, though.
We did not start in Dallas, Texas.
Okay, so we started in Newark, New Jersey, and it was interesting. We thought that we were going to be on time. We got dropped off at 11 o'clock by our dear friend Scott Rajapi. And then there were some delays on the tarmac. The very hot tarmac, by the way.
Well, can I say, before we get to that part, if you have not flown out of Terminal A in Newark Airport, I did not feel like I was in. Have you been in Terminal A?
I have.
Oh, my goodness.
It's lovely.
It is
beautiful.
They spent literally billions of dollars, I read, on this thing.
Terminal A is the HNL. HNL. You know what the HNL is? It's the whole nother level.
It was.
Yeah.
I was walking in. The doors were opening for me. I don't know if you had this thought when you go. Did you fly out of Terminal A2, Tim?
I've flown out of Terminal A,
Okay,
yeah.
so you walk into the security line, and the scanners for the bags literally look like the warp engines on the Starship Enterprise. Did you guys have that thought too? I was like, that looks like a starship. And
I thought the whole terminal was going to take off and like just fly us all.
I guess. And this was the first time I ever went through security, and they did not make me take my laptop out, which will come back into the story later on. When I was flying out of Dallas, they were not happy with me.
Pleasantly surprised with this lax attitude.
I didn't think I was getting back from Dallas because I followed the Newark Protocol down in Dallas.
Yeah, yeah. You
All right.
listen, Dallas is locked down. So, yeah, big delay. Unfortunately, we missed Rod Dreher in his talk the first night because of our
I caught
delay.
the end of Rod Dreher. They were talking about the dissidents, and he had a person out there.
Right.
You missed Rod Dreher.
Right. So one of the things I'm doing is teaching adjunct at a college, local Christian college, Pillar College, and I had this class to teach, and I was going to set up my laptop in the hotel and teach the lecture from the hotel room. So my plan was to get there, and it was going to be great. And then we had this late thing on the tarmac, so I'm emailing the students going, hey, this might be an hour later than I was expecting. Then we're in the rental car, and Bob's like driving the ship, and I'm like, this is not going to happen.
I've driven to Dallas. I had no idea where I was going, and Dave's over here on his
seeing
phone
the sights.
teaching a class.
He's taking in the glory of Texas, and I'm starting the class on my phone. Like, hey, good evening, students. Professor Henschel, so sorry about this. I have no slides. I have like no background. It's
charts.
I couldn't share my charts.
He just had to verbally describe the charts to the people.
And so Bob's like orienting the car and trying to configure how to get to this hotel from the airport, and I'm singing songs because I was doing the prophetic books, and I always teach like this jingle for the Southern prophets, right? So the Southern prophets are hard to remember. Which ones were they? So I have this jingle that has like this acronym. So it's HIJZMJL, and I sing it to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So it's like HIJZMJL, let us learn these prophets well. This is who God used to tell, HIJZMJL. And of course, that's like
I'm over there
Habakkuk, and
Right.
so that's how you remember them. And so I'm like literally singing this
He's
kid
singing
song.
the song, and I'm like, Dave, do
on
we
my
need to turn
phone.
right here? Do we turn left here? I don't know.
I'm like, I got a kid song to sing
Where's
right now, man.
Arlington?
You got to find the hotel. Then we pull into the parking deck, and my call drops. So the professor's no longer in the classroom, and Bob's like, man, you're on your own. He gets out of the car and goes to the conference, and
I
stuck.
said, I'm missing Rod Dreher. You just finish your class down here,
Right.
and I'll see you later.
So I finished the class from the parking deck at the hotel and said, students, I'm really sorry. Next week will be much better. I'll send my charts afterward. And so then I had to do. So it was a dicey beginning, but we got there, and then we arrived right when the Mavericks were winning the Western Conference semifinals.
This was an experience.
That was the funniest part of my
Thursday night.
weekend.
Yeah.
Are you still watching basketball?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going into the heart of all things sports Dallas. So that's where the Texas Stadium is. That's where the Rangers play. Everything's there. There's this big, huge complex for like watching NBA games. There's hundreds and hundreds of people.
So the hotel we stayed at was literally in between the Ranger Stadium,
Right.
the old Ranger Stadium, and the Cowboy Stadium,
Right.
which I didn't realize when I looked on the map. It's like right there.
Everything's in Arlington.
And they had this sport viewing pavilion inside.
Right, so Bob and I are starving. We're looking
It's
for like
10
a
o'clock.
burger.
We haven't eaten since 12 because
Yeah.
of this delay.
Right, so we're looking for like something. And the only thing we could find is this pizza place in this huge sports complex with hundreds and hundreds of people. So we walk in, and there's this erupting celebration for the Mavs because they just won the Western Conference Finals since I don't know how long, whenever Dirk Nowitzki
The
was there.
subwoofer was making our chests.
It's seriously,
my
that was some
heart was
loud-
vibrating because of this.
There was two musical situations that were really amazing, Tim. So the first one was like I thought I was going to have arrhythmia from the
I
bass
love it.
in this.
I was like, I
this
just
match.
want a pizza.
I'm like, oh my god, like I might need to leave. My ribs are vibrating. This is like beyond any concert I've ever gone to. The Mavs are exploding. Texas is on fire. And then there was a pool, and they had underwater music. You could only hear the music when you went under the
This
water.
is all he talked about yesterday.
I've never seen such a thing. Like
That's
this was
wild.
the
They had
fanciest
underwater
pool
music.
ever. So above the pool, your head's above the water, you don't hear nothing. Then you go down, and it's like a dance party down there. There's neon lights and there's music only under the water.
If you like hip hop, you stay above the water. If you prefer more R&B, you go below.
It was crazy, man. So it was a good experience.
Well, I was saying this thing with these conferences is if it's a larger conference, which this one wound up being decently sized, they always have to find these convention centers, and they're usually attached to these really expensive hotels. So you go there, they get you the discounted rate. So it's like I felt like, wow, I got this room for this like Motel 6 prices, and but the food doesn't change. You are struggling to find a cheeseburger under $30 somewhere, and you got to like scour around to find how can I eat. I'm above my pay grade right here.
We did eventually find a cheeseburger, but we'll talk about that later in the program. One of Bob's favorite cheeseburgers in the world.
I have.
Tim?
I have to say, the video that you sent me, so I was watching a hockey game because I'm a hockey fan.
I heard there's hockey going on now, too.
Dallas nearly had two teams in finals. The Dallas Stars.
Sport? Who likes hockey?
Hey, excuse me. The Dallas Stars got eliminated last night in the conference finals. But so I switched after.
That's because we left town.
That's right. That was that monsoon that kept us on the tarmac in Dallas yesterday.
Yeah.
I switched on to see what's going on with the basketball game because I'm not a big basketball fan, but I do like
Tim,
keeping along with it.
You shouldn't say that kind of thing out loud.
Well, he just insulted hockey,
That's
so we're blows are being thrown around here.
That's
but what do you call it? So I text you. I was like, looks like a great night to be Dallas, and I'll put it on the screen right here. I got this incredible video of Pastor Dave just like in his
celebrating
element
with all the Texans. There was like Stetson hats everywhere. You said you thought Bob was in one of the Cowboy hats,
there's
right?
if you'll notice in the video that just played, there was a guy. You might have to rewind. There was a guy in a black outfit and a black cowboy hat, and at first glance I thought that was Bob. I thought Bob was just got himself a get-up, and was in his full Texas garb.
So I was over getting my pizza and eating because I hadn't eaten in 10 hours.
Right. So to the conference, great speakers. Obviously, John Stone Street. Some of the speakers that were your favorites were who did you really enjoy?
Okay, so as far as the speakers, I don't know. So obviously, John Stone Street's great. He's wonderful. Also, they had Kathy Cook, who runs a kids ministry. She was
fantastic. Check that out.
Who else did I like quite a bit? Neil Shenvey and Pat Sawyer. Who actually Neil Shenvey is coming to our Contend conference.
Oh,
another funny story. Neil Shenvey. You might not know him, but you'll hear him soon. I ran into him Friday morning in the coffee shop, and I tried to introduce myself, and it was very clear he was in a hurry. And it was always a risk. You're like, they don't know who I am. I walked up. I said, Neil, you don't know who I am, but you're coming to my church next year. He's like, oh, okay. And then he walked away.
Yeah. Neil had like 2 or 3 talks. He had a lot going on, including some awesome charts that we'll hear about later in the show. But, so Neil was one of your favorites?
Neil was one of my favorites. Katie Faust was there. We've had Katie Faust for an underground. She's great. She had some really, really awesome stories and insights. And then so the theme of the conference was courageous faith. Courageous faith. So they had lots of people who were sharing stories of standing up for their faith, living by biblical principles in their career in modern world, and a lot of them had faced consequences. So, for example, Kristen Collier is a doctor at the University of Michigan Medical School, and you may remember, I think it was last year, she spoke at their medical school like white coat thing, and people walked out on her because she's pro-life.
Well, first they tried to get her removed as
her removed, and then
then I think it was the dean of the University of Michigan spoke up for her right to speak. Yeah. She spoke, and then there was a scheduled walkout. So she had a great talk.
Yeah. So so she was great. She told that story, and then also this guy Steve Grusevich, is that how you say his name? Steve Grusevich? I hadn't heard of him before, but he's an adolescent psychiatrist who was part of this program called the Identity Project, which we have a ton of resources. We'll have to figure out a way to disseminate those out. But he was against a lot of the gender-affirming, gender transition stuff. Mm-hmm. And he was, I think he got deplatformed or something because of that. So
towards the end of his career. Yeah.
Oh, and then that January Littlejohn is a parents' right advocate. Her daughter down in Florida was like trying to go by different pronouns and almost kind of like transition at school, and the school kept it from the parents. Right. So she advocates for parents knowing things now.
Yeah, her daughter began to get transitioned without parental consent at a very young age, and she since has fought back the school. That's a great talk, by the way. I know that January has a bunch of stuff on YouTube. It's worth your time to just search her name and see that story and see her telling it. It's a very compelling
I got
story.
some ideas about people. Maybe we can see if they'll come on the Underground podcast.
Nice.
So maybe you'll hear about these people later on.
Yeah.
So those were some. I will say there was 2 casualties of people that I really wanted to see at the conference who didn't make it because of this crazy weather story we told you.
So can you define the word casualty for our audience? Because I don't think that word means what you think it means.
Casualties in the sense that they did not make it to the conference due to the weather delays. So the 2 people that I really wanted to see.
So they're still alive.
Yes.
They're
Okay.
still
They
alive.
just didn't
They're
come to
still
the
alive.
conference.
As far as I know, as of today, they're still alive.
In Bob's mind, they're dead to Bob, but
Sean McDowell, Dr. Sean McDowell was not there. And to Dave's, Dave fell on the floor. Dr. Al Mohler was supposed to be there.
it was
and
bad.
Man.
They hid
was
that from
super
us until
disappointing.
till the moment he was supposed to go on stage, so we were wondering.
Right.
Which actually would have been a really interesting if he was there, because they had this other Anglican guy from England who was
Right.
who was an interesting speaker, and I would have loved to see him and Al kind of spar, because the theme of that session was church unity, right?
Right.
But you had the Baptist and you had the he was Anglican, right? Is that
Yeah.
yeah? And he is the British accent the whole time,
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
So I mean, everybody wants church unity, but it's how do we get there?
yeah.
So
yeah.
very good.
So good.
In,
So-
in other news, we had some fun at the conference. So we
Okay.
were able to escape a little bit. Saturday
at the
night, we
end.
got some good Mexican food at Gloria's. I got to see.
I met Dave's brother.
my brother. Do you think my brother looks like me, or what do you think?
I did think there was a resemblance.
saw it.
If you take off the glasses and you look at the eyes,
It's
see
the
if
eyes.
Julie agrees with me about this.
Yeah.
Let's see. You could see it.
We're a
you know.
very blue-eyed family.
Yeah.
So we got to do that, and then
Can I just tell this? Dave said, I said, well, how does he look different? He goes, well, he's got hair.
that's a big difference.
And he said, well,
shout out Rob.
And he's
My
like
brother with
3
the
inches
hair.
shorter than me. I'm like, oh, wow, a whole 3 inches shorter than
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So we got to escape a little bit Saturday night. And then Sunday afternoon,
Yeah.
Bob had a request. Tim, I know you're going to be surprised by this, but of all the things that Bob wanted to do in Dallas, and we did do some other things. I took him to see, like, the Reunion Tower, and we saw where JFK was shot. We saw, a couple other sites there. But Bob wanted to go to the George W. Bush Presidential Library. Now, Tim, I know that's a shock to
It's
you.
a library and museum.
I wouldn't
Libra-
have listen. If I knew there was a library there, I couldn't have guessed that Bob would want to go there. Couldn't
Well,
have.
by the way,
That's
did you know
shocking.
that George Bush famously was he read like 50 books a year? Like he had like a book reading competition with people in his administration.
I like to read.
Yeah. I gotta read.
So the strategery
like to
was...
read all the books.
Hey, Rummy, how many books you read this year?
I try to read 30 books a year.
Condi, I got more than you, Condi. It was really great. It was interesting to kind of go back through of course, the 9/11, and they did a good job with it.
Yeah, so there's
yeah.
some pictures of Bob sitting at the desk in the replica of the Oval Office.
And Dave,
And
we both got a picture
we
of
both
the
got
Oval
a chance to
of the
sit there,
Bush Oval Office.
which was fun. It had a pretty cool, like, situation room replication where they actually used the furniture, the table, the paneling from the real situation room, so we got to see that. So it was a pretty cool... thank you. It was a good stop. The library
I'm
was
glad.
well worth our time.
I did that, and then I insisted on In-N-Out Burger.
In-N-Out Burger. So
So
tell
this
us
is for
about
my wife.
In-N-Out-
My
In-N-Out
wife.
Burger.
So In-N-Out Burger is a fast food chain. It was a novelty for many years because you could only get it in California. Christian owned. So if you pull up the Dave was surprised by this. You open up your Coke and you look at the bottom, and John 3:16 is there.
I did not know that.
The reason that it is only in California is because the stores had to be a certain amount of miles away from where they make the meat, so that the meat is fresh. And you can get, it's a very simple menu, but people love it. If you went to California, you had to go In-N-Out Burger. But now they've expanded to other states. So they're in Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, and Texas. So I took Dave. My wife loves In-N-Out Burger because she grew up in California. And her favorite thing is the animal-style fries, which I made Dave eat. So what was your thoughts on In-N-Out Burger?
It was delicious. My stomach, a few hours later, was reminding me that I had eaten there. That was
But you told us in a previous one that Five Guys is your restaurant of choice. So how did it compare to Five Guys?
I think Five Guys is superior, but I understand the novelty of In-N-Out, and
Okay.
I appreciated the John 3:16, and it was a great burger. So, Steve, have you had In-N-Out Burger before?
I have. I think Five Guys takes it, though.
Yeah.
That's
All right.
Spoken like an East Coaster. There you go. So that was our trip. Hopefully Tim dropped in some of the pictures in there.
I did.
There's other stories, such as yesterday. The reason we got back at 1 a.m. is because we were delayed again leaving Dallas. And I swear, I watched the weather app all day. There was no rain, but just as we got on the plane, there literally was a monsoon. Even to the point where the pilot, when we got to New York, said, that weather in Dallas was no joke.
Right. Yeah.
2.5 hours again on the tarmac, leaving Dallas.
Here we are podcasting at 8 in the morning. All right.
I watched all of the Lord of the Rings movies between Dallas.
Bob was deep in the heart of the smog dungeons. He was sitting in the seat in front of me, and I was kind of like, what are these spiders doing? So that was Bob on the plane. So speaking of courageous faith, we have a guest
Courageous
today.
faith. There we go.
And,
Theme of the conference. And we have a courageous missionary
Steve,
right here.
can you tell us, 60-second flyover, who you are, tell us about your family, and tell us about where God has called you?
Sure. My name's Stephen Anderson. I met my wife at Liberty University. We're both graduates from Liberty, and I work construction with my dad. Gwen is a nurse, and we just had on our hearts ever since we got married to really pursue missions and ministry. Long story short, we got connected with a ministry called Lebensel, which is a German-based organization that's now rooted in the U.S.
Those Germans, man.
Yeah.
We love those Germans.
And they're a small organization, so we just share with them kind of our heart for missions and ministry. They were talking with us, and they gave us a couple options. One was in Zambia, and one was in Ecuador. And we were praying about it. We met through FaceTime the missionaries that were down in Ecuador and decided to risk it and do a short-term trip to Ecuador. So last year we did a 2-week trip to Ecuador. Kevin and Kathy Bruce are the missionaries down there with Lebensel. Long story short, they're awesome. They're amazing people, and that's what I was praying for going down there. Apparently a lot of missionaries, they leave the field because of tensions with other missionaries. And so I was praying, just God, if these are going to be our potential partners, just knit our hearts together. And I just pray for unity and respect. And, they're in their 50s. And so I would obviously be discipled by them. And really, they're passing the baton to me. So I'm going to be looking to them for leadership and instruction. But yeah, long story short, you guys, it was just an incredible trip. And God really confirmed on our hearts that Ecuador is for us. So they're in a northern part of Ecuador, ministering to a unreached people group called the Awa people. And there's a small church plant there that they need help with. So they've just been praying. And I just felt God put on my heart, like we can be there for them and help in that ministry. So so we're going to Ecuador, and our leave date is tentative. Gwen, my wife, is due with baby number 3 in August, so we're looking at probably the fall of 2024. We're kind of flexible. We need to get a passport and social security card, and so all that's kind of we're kind of rolling with that. But
the fall of 2024 is like in 3 months, right? Is that what you're talking about?
3-4 months, I'd say. Yeah.
All right, good.
Awesome.
So this is like right around the corner. This is not like in the future. Yeah.
Yes,
all right.
sir.
So Steve's one of our newest world partners, right? How long ago did you come on with Millington?
Yeah, 2023. Yeah, so 6-7 months ago.
Great.
Yeah.
So exciting family. Get to know Steve and be in prayer for
Thank you.
all things related to the trip to Ecuador, for his dear wife Gwen, the children, and obviously the upcoming transition plan for the fall.
Yeah, it's a big step of faith, and it's kind of it's a little bit scary, but we know that God's God's called us, so we're trying to step out in faith and be faithful. Yeah.
Good.
So tell me a bit about the mission. So this a German organization, and do they have a specialization? So it's German, but you're going to Ecuador.
Sure.
What's their are they affiliated with a church? Like, what's their background?
So Hudson Taylor, if you guys are familiar with Hudson Taylor.
Do I know who Hudson Taylor is? Come on. You know
Well-
anything about missions, you know Hudson Taylor.
He's a famous missionary. In the early 1900s, he was speaking in Lebensel, Germany, and from that message,
so that's actually a city. That's
yes,
why it's
named after
very
a town
cool.
in Germany.
What
Yep.
does it mean?
It's just the name of a town, like Bridgewater.
Well, I know, but
or
it means
Clinton.
something though. That's Lebensel.
Leben means life.
Life,
So, yeah.
life, the life to the full, maybe. I don't
Maybe.
know.
Yeah.
All right.
So, he was speaking in Lebensel, and from that, some missionaries got convicted and started a ministry in Germany. And from that, actually, in World War II, some German missionaries got stranded in America, and they couldn't go back to Germany, obviously. So they started an American branch, and that's up in Long Valley, New Jersey, where we just moved to, actually, a couple weeks ago. They offered us an apartment as we're preparing for the mission field. So
That's great.
Our family's now located in Long Valley as we're getting ready for the next step.
So exciting. Well, we'll hear from Steve more in the program as some of the ways God's been leading him, prompting him, providing for him in special ways. But it's good to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
So I'm looking on here. Zell in German. It looks like it means a phone booth. What did you say Laban was? Laban was life?
Something else.
The phone booth of life. It's got to be something else.
No, I don't think that's it, Bob. Sorry, Steve.
All right. So so that was the spotlight here. So what should we do next? We should do the in the news. What do you think?
Touch on some news items.
Let's do the news because that'll go along with Steve. So we're going to talk about what's going on in the news. All right, so Steve, I don't mean to intimidate you here, but there was a news story that happened this last week. If you're paying attention, down in Haiti, there was some missionaries that went down there, young missionaries, I think early 20s, and they were killed in some gang activity, I believe, with some abductions. So, let me pull it up here. What was their names again? So remains Natalie Lloyd, who actually was the daughter of a representative in Oklahoma, I believe, and Davy Lloyd. So they were the couple and a Haitian man they worked with were fatally shot by gang members in Haiti's capital of Port-au-Prince last week after they were attacked while leaving a youth group activity held at a local church. So, I mean, this is certainly not the first story of missionaries getting attacked. I think you're going to Ecuador, isn't that where Jim Elliot went very famously? So Jim Elliot very famously went to reach the unreached people groups in Ecuador, the
Auca Indians, right?
Right, and he was very famously killed, and then the person who killed him became a Christian, and the whole tribe came to Christ. So I think one of the things that I'm always amazed by when I have a world partner that comes, and especially if you're going to a harder area, is that you literally in some ways are putting yourself in danger for the gospel. And that's what these folks were doing, and sadly they did lose their lives, but they gained their lives being with Christ. So that's the people probably can't understand why would you go into these dangerous places and these violent places for Jesus, and it's because we believe that we have the hope of eternal life. So I don't know if that strikes anything with you, but this was in the story in the news recently, and it's sad, but also they were very firm, and this is what God was calling them to do. So
yeah, I just thought of that song, "This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. My treasure's all laid up somewhere beyond the blue."
Yeah.
And that's just, I was speaking yesterday at a church about building up treasure in heaven, and these people were doing that. So I know that's just, if I'm going to be spending my life building up treasure, I want to spend it building up treasure in the right place.
So Davy Lloyd spent most of his life in Haiti, where his parents founded the nonprofit organization Missions in Haiti. He was kidnapped along with his two sisters at the age of 5. So he was kidnapped at the age of 5, and now he was. They were released the next day, and now he's with the Lord. He says, having grown up in Haiti, Davy witnessed the Haitian people's daily struggle for survival, the family wrote in the obituary. He was able to relate to them, which made him a great missionary to Haiti. So, wow, that's inspiring.
It kind of reminds me of the theme of the conference, Courageous Faith. And what they said at the conference was really an over and over repeated theme of, like, courage is contagious. So throughout the conference, they just kept on telling these stories of people who would put their families at risk, sacrifice, like Steve is doing, moving away from comfortable America to remote place of the world in Ecuador. Why would people do that?
Yeah.
Let me ask you, how does that make any sense to do that?
People need to hear the gospel. There's people in the world that are so much less fortunate than us, both physically and spiritually, and God loves them too. So it's not for everybody. Obviously, there needs to be people that send out the people that are sent out. But God, just for Gwen and I, my wife and I, we are just convicted that we need to go and reach these people and share the good news of the gospel. Yeah,
and you never know how God's going to use you. The call. Actually, one of the things that what was that line that Katie Faust had? She talked a lot about the high risk life for God in one of her talks, and she was talking about how a lot of times it might require you to be obedient for God to use you in some of these cases in a way that you don't want to. Which, by the way, I forgot to mention at the conference, Amy Huber, who runs First Choice Women's Resource Center was there with the Alliance Defending Freedom and sharing about her story. And just an update about that, if you don't know, they were at the New Jersey, was it the Appeals Court, State Supreme Court? State Supreme Court. I forget which court they were at, but they were doing an appeal and they didn't get a favorable reasoning. And she was saying, I really wish they did a ruling that put it to bed. But she said, I got a sense from the Lord the day before it happened that this is not going to end now, because we need to keep going to reach a final decision, and God's going to use the process for His glory. So a lot of times we don't want to go through that suffering, but sometimes the suffering is what God is going to use to not only shape you, but make a bigger impact. Because we were saying, if this had gotten settled a few months ago, Amy might not have been raising awareness of this at this conference, right? So we're getting at the platform she's getting to share about what's going on is big.
Yeah, shout out to Amy. She spoke with such poise and such graciousness there, and actually used the word privilege when it comes to suffering and experiencing political persecution for the gospel and for the sake of the truth and for the sake of life. She got a couple different rounds of applause and a standing ovation when she sat down. It was really a proud moment.
I want to say, at this conference, I have never seen so many standing ovations of people getting up, like applauding for every speaker sharing about their story.
Because their courageous faith was really inspiring, and I think we all wanted to see that. I think we all sort of feel that. One of the speakers had a great quote. He was a stand-in for Al Mohler, so
Kelvin Cochran, the guy who was the fire chief of Atlanta, who lost his job for having biblical views on marriage.
Yeah, and so he spoke, and
years ago.
There was one line that I thought would be worthy of repeating. He said this: "There are kingdom consequences for standing on biblical truth, but they are always greater than the worldly consequences." And so this is what he was arguing for, that no matter what consequence there is for taking a stand or for needing to suffer for the sake of the gospel, it's always for God's glory. And, Jesus said, whatever you give up for the sake of the gospel, I'll return to you up to 100 times in this life, and then in the life to come, eternal life.
Yeah.
But then in a convicting statement, he said, Lord, how come we're not experiencing more of this severe persecution in the United States, such as people around the world actually putting their lives on the line? And he felt like the Lord was telling him, because the United States Christians are not ready. They're barely willing to stand up for me on social media. They're barely willing to put their job on the line for taking a stand against what's going on.
Yeah.
So to put their lives at risk, Americans are not quite ready. And I thought that was a convicting statement. That how can we be more prepared? How can we be more ready?
We're too comfortable.
People over there are willing to die for what some of us aren't even willing to live for.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a very good convicting
Well,
thought.
John Stone Street, I think, has started to talk more about one of the things they like to do at the Colson Center is we really need to start giving people a theology of losing their job. Because people will hide from some of these convictions. I can't say this in public for fear that maybe they'll lose their livelihood. But is there times to stand up for our faith?
Right.
And I think there's all these issues out there that are now quote unquote political, but they're really not political in our minds. They're biblical or they're moral, and they're being thrust into this political space because of the current moment that's going on. And it's the job piece is probably something that people are feeling a lot more today. And we're going to see it probably in other areas. Maybe we're not losing our life yet, but we might be losing livelihoods and being ostracized from certain areas of society.
Yeah.
So
shout out to those who stand courageous, even in Haiti.
Thank you, Steve, man.
And
making it happen down there. The Lord is going to use you.
Yes, He is.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, why don't we move on from that? That was a good story. I had one other one, but maybe we can save that for next week, Pastor Dave. Can we move on to the Great Book War?
Sure.
Which is going to dovetail with there's a chart for that.
All right. So, can I start?
Go ahead and start.
Hey, we have a special deal for you guys today. Free on Amazon today is our Proverbs devotional. It's a 30-day guide through the book of Proverbs that Pastor Bob and I put together. And we are offering that today to download and make it your own. This is a great journey through the wisdom of the book of Proverbs. So check it out. We can link to that on our social media channel. We want to make sure that you get a copy of that. If you do want a hard copy, that's available through Amazon as well. But that is my book recommendation for today. Shameless plug. It is a book that Bob and I wrote together. That feels a little awkward, but we did want you to know it's available for free.
It's free. It's free.
I think it'll be a blessing to you. And I think Bob might have a book as well. Shock.
Okay. Well, I have a thicker book right here. Sorry. But this is
my book can beat up
This
your
is a book called Critical Dilemma. by Neil Shenvi and Pat Sawyer, and they were speakers at the conference. And as I mentioned before, Neil is going to be speaking at our Contend conference in January of 2025. So let me just read you the subtitle. So it's Critical Dilemma. The subtitle is The Rise of Critical Theories and Social Justice Ideology, Implications for the Church and Society. So it's a thick book, but if you probably hear in popular conversation, oh, that's just critical theory, that's critical race theory, that's critical queer theory, or whatever else it is. This book gives you a primer on what is actually meant by that, from two Christian authors reading the people that are putting out those ideas. And they put it in really accessible terms. Even though they're two PhDs, they do a great job of that.
And nothing makes something more accessible quite like a chart, right? That book is full of charts.
So Neil spoke, and especially in his second talk, I will tell you, he had just chart after chart after chart, and I saw Dave just the smile by the end you were in the rafters, I think.
If you want to know the way to my heart, make a chart. It is unbelievable, man.
Dude, that's a t-shirt right there.
So check out this one chart here.
If you want to know the way to my heart, you gotta make a chart.
Hey, you got a jingle to it. I like this. Very good, Bob. So check out this one
here.
One
in particular, page 284. And Tim, I did text you this, so if you want to put insert if you got time.
What that is it's a parallel contrast between the gospel story and then the critical race theory story, and how they are very different. They really are two different narratives, two different ways of understanding human sin, two different ways of understanding what is redemption and salvation, and two different hopes for where we're going. And they really are incompatible. You can't take one and try to fit in the other. There's some incongruities there that just cannot be melded together.
Well, the thing I found interesting about his main stage talk, he started off by showing this chart from the New York Times, and these words of like white supremacy, white privilege, I think there was a few other ones, that until you get to the mid 2018 are very low, and then all of a sudden it's like a huge shot up on how many times those words are used.
More.
So the cultural conversation has kind of gone in that direction, and they really break down why that is, and what the genesis of that conversation was, and why critical theory is ultimately a worldview that's incompatible with the gospel.
I like the illustration Shenvi gave at the conference. He said, so this was in the halls of Marxism and philosophy, and so people who were studying this were basically just on the academic level. And so if critical theory was a virus, in 2020 there was a lab leak, and the virus became a pandemic, and now it became part of the popular cultural understanding. Even though people don't understand what critical theory is, the language we're using, the kind of narrative that people are embracing now is a result of what happened in the academy 100 years ago. And so now it's spread fast and wide everywhere.
He did open up by giving the disclaimer that his talk wasn't about Trump, because Trump kind of popularized this, but it really is not. It's a much bigger thing. So it would be a misnomer to do that and dismiss the arguments they're making because of that. Yeah. So Critical Dilemma, pick up this book. Or Neil has a website, shenviapologetics.com, which, by the way, one of the things he does is review books. So if you want to go get a review on a bunch of books, you can go to his website if you don't want to read them.
Notice how Bob took careful observation to that feature of his website.
Notice how Dave knew the exact page where the chart was. He's like, open up to page 284.
Touche.
It's right there. All right, so that is the great book war. All right, let's move on in our last couple segments to some audience questions. And Noah preached yesterday.
Noah Graves.
So we'll talk a little bit about the persistent widow, and then sprint on out of here. So was there any questions that we need to address out there, Tim?
Not this week.
No questions. Wow. I'll
Just
take that.
For the sake of time, mainly. But
okay, perfect. So let's talk a little bit about Noah's sermon. I didn't get to see it, but Dave did, so maybe you can tee off some conversational topics here.
Okay, sure.
So I'm certainly familiar with the parable, but it's his take on it.
Thank you, Noah. Luke chapter 18, the first few verses, I think it's the first 8 verses, is parable of the persistent widow, going on with our stories of Jesus theme. Of course, the basic parable is that there's this widow who's got an adversary, and he's mistreating her somehow. So she's going to this judge who's an unjust judge again and again. She keeps going to try to get justice because of whatever her adversary is doing to her. And the judge, who doesn't fear God and doesn't really care about people, eventually gets worn out by her asking and pleading for justice and gives her what she wants. And then so Jesus tells that story. And then this is one of those like argument from the lesser to the greater, says, how much more when you go to our God and plead and pray to him, is he going to bring you justice in your life and answer your prayers? And then he has this like convicting question at the very end. And he says, but when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? And so that's the basic parable. It's about prayer. It's about persistence in prayer. And of course, God is not like the unjust judge at all, nor are we really like the widow. So we are God's child. We are in no way, shape, or form alone or destitute. We have God as our Father. We are loved by God. We have all the resources of Christ. And when we go to God in prayer, we don't go to an unjust judge who doesn't care about people. We go to a loving, merciful, generous Father who loves to give good gifts to his children. Our prayer page on our website says our prayers are God's delight, and he loves to have us come and ask. And so keep on praying, keep on seeking. And then Noah. Sorry, Noah. I just called you Moses. So Noah's...
Can we just today, let's just call Noah all day Moses. Hey, Moses, get over here.
That just happened.
I just got an email from Moses. There we go.
We got David over here. We got Stephen the deacon, and I don't know if there's a Bob in the Bible, but
I got two books.
Timothy's got two. Yeah. So Noah concluded with that challenge, the question at the end. So, will the Son of Man find faith on the earth? And so he said to the audience, he said, "What about you? Like, how will you answer that question? Will he find faith on the earth?"
Yeah.
Let your answer be yes. So I thought that was a good application. Thank you, Noah, for your exposition. So any
That's
thoughts
great.
here today from the group here about
I
prayer?
have some thoughts. I have some thoughts,
persistence?
Elder Henschel. I got some thoughts over here.
We should go out Saturday morning.
My bosom is
2 by
burning
2
right now.
and knock on some doors. Scare people.
Well, first, can I mention that was a great summary at the beginning of chapter 18. So you may have noticed, and we did say this before, that we skipped over chapter 17. So there wasn't any parables in there, but we are going to try to build in some Teaching Tuesdays and cover these sections that we didn't cover on Sunday morning. So be on the lookout for some teaching on chapter 17. It'll fit in between chapter 16 and 18. But 18's got some pretty famous parables. This is one. So your thought about this parable, that was great. And I was thinking how this actually kind of dovetails in with what we're talking about in this whole episode with the courageous faith. And even Steve, I mean, you're thinking about going out to the mission field. I don't know, what was your prayer experience like with that? So was it like you're praying, God didn't totally answer? Do you consistently pray? Has there been a situation in your journey or in your life where you felt like you had to be persistent in prayer? Because I think a lot of us don't like... Our prayer life is like, God, help me today, but we don't persistently ask for things. So I don't know if that strikes anything with you.
No, that just made me think of something. In Bible college, one of my professors said, for any big decision, you need the 3 Ps, and you need to pray over the 3 Ps: permission, provision, and peace. And
that's good.
That's always stuck with me, Bob.
That'll preach, man.
We got a 3-part sermon
you got to have
coming
some
on.
3 Ps.
So, just working through this process of praying over Ecuador, we have permission to go. Obviously, God has commanded for us to go out and make disciples. Provision, we're currently working on raising support, and Millington is supporting us, and we're just continually receiving
You're part of the provision right there?
Yeah. We're just, just as far as provision goes, I just see God answering our prayers and providing for us the means to go. And peace. I just, there's certain times in my life where I just feel, I don't know how to describe it except just spiritually, I feel God blessing and, just opening doors for certain paths in my life, and I just feel like this is one of those things, and I just have a peace about that. So it's hard to describe that part, but
okay, it's not a burning in the bosom, right? It's a different thing. So
we jest, but
the prayer that you were sharing,
fire of the Spirit.
You were sharing with me earlier, prayer for support, and how God has showed up in sort of ways that you weren't expecting.
Sure.
And I think you were telling a story about how God provided some support that was totally out of left field that could only be God. So can you share that?
Absolutely. That's one of the ways that I've just felt so much peace is because of stories like that. So in Flemington, there's an Amish market.
Shout out to Flemington. I'm just saying, it's a good town.
My wife
Is that
likes
New Jersey?
to.
Good things happen there.
New Jersey or Pennsylvania? I can't tell.
So my wife, Gwen, she likes to shop at the Amish market, and this was over the wintertime. She was walking out of the store. She didn't have a jacket, and there was an older man in his mid-80s, and he said, "Oh, if I had my jacket, I'd give it to you, but I already gave it to somebody else." And so my wife, Gwen, was like, "That's kind of... Are you a Christian by any chance? You're so nice." And this guy, his name's Pastor David Erickson. He's in his mid-80s. He said, "I'm a pastor." And Gwen started telling him about what God put on our hearts and how we're planning on going to Ecuador. That turned into him wanting to meet both of us, so we had dinner together, and that turned into a Bible study where he actually hosts a Bible study in Flemington with several other pastors, and that's turned into 6 different churches asking me to come speak, all from just a 30-second coincidence that's not a coincidence of Gwen walking out at the right place at the right time. So that just was such an answer to prayer to me of God just if God wants us to go to Ecuador, then he's going to provide the means to go. So
it's a great story. Praise the Lord.
Chapter 18, verse 1. I love the phrase. He told the parable to the effect that they ought always to pray and not lose heart. I don't know what the grammatical thing in the Greek is about the to the effect, like was he not clear, or they just sensed it. But I think that idea of praying and not losing heart in this whole courageous faith idea and what you were talking about, like there's things we desire that we should do, or there's some suffering that comes in our life, and sometimes you just don't want to pray, but Jesus says pray and don't lose heart. And then the story is just, to me, is really cool because you got an adversary, you asking for justice, and then I love the judge's response about this whole thing. Though I neither fear God nor respect man, yet this widow keeps bothering me.
Yeah.
I'll give her justice so she won't beat me down by her continual coming. That's what in the ESV. But it's this picture of us just continually persistently coming to God, trusting that this widow, giving us the example, trusting him that he can do what he says he can do. And I think that's the question about the end that Jesus is asking, but Noah highlighted. Will he find faith? Do you have the faith to keep coming to him in prayer, or do you just give up when the trials come? I think about all these people that I'm praying, Lord, and I can't believe this thing. I'm praying, Lord, and the rains came again in Dallas. We're sitting on the tarmac again for 3 hours.
Right.
And I don't know if you were persistently praying, Dave, but I was just laughing.
Apparently not enough. Yeah. But the
that's
Lord got us home.
Illustration for there's very real things that come in our life. When the adversary comes, will you persistently pray and believe that there's a God who can walk you through whatever challenge comes? So I don't know. That's what I thought about this, and even in your description of it. What did you think? Is this one of your favorite parables?
I love the parable of the persistent widow. There's been many times in my life where I've had to come to God again and again and again.
You've been a persistent widow.
Yeah. I mean, the Bible speaks of a God who listens, who actually hears us when we pray, and it's amazing. At the same time, for some reason, I don't know why, it's just sitting there talking to God, I find it hard, right? So that's why it's called wrestle in prayer, labor in prayer. For some reason, just talking to the Lord can be something that causes us to lose heart. And so Jesus knows that, and he tells this story to encourage us that God is listening. He invites us to be watchmen on the walls and to keep on coming to him, keep on pestering him, keep on bothering him, and he will answer in his time above and beyond anything we could ever ask or imagine. So prayer is a wonderful resource, and we have this opportunity to come to the God of the universe and let him know our requests. I think it was John Newton who said, "Thou art coming to a king, large petitions with thee bring, for his grace and power are such, none can ever ask too much." So keep on praying. Will he find faith on the earth? Let your answer be yes.
Amen. That'll preach. We got 3 P's. We got preaching. We got persistence right here, Pastor
Noah
Dave.
did it. Yeah. Thank you, Noah, for the good word.
There you go. Looking forward to his blog post on it. All right. So Tim, we got a Theology Sprint question?
Yeah, it's the one I was going to ask last week. We skipped it.
I forgot what it was. What is it?
I feel like Steve's in good sprinting condition.
Oh, dear.
Let's see what you think here. Well, let's ask the question.
Yikes. Yeah, we'll see after
So,
we'll just
Steve was
vote.
like, "Do you guys don't know the question ahead
There's
of time?"
three of
I'm
us.
like,
We can
"No."
vote who gets to
This
answer
is
the
like,
question.
You get butterflies, and it's like a regular source of stress in my life every week. So
So what happens is Noah takes and he turns it into a short. I don't know if you've seen those on our social media channels. So yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about the Theology Sprint with Felicity at a Fresh Wave meeting, and she goes, "Yeah, he doesn't like those."
Who doesn't like those?
take a wild guess.
Oh, you.
Who Felicity might be talking to.
Is that why there's no smiles when you're doing it?
I'm so full of anxiety. I can't find my smile.
Again.
Like,
So if this
Again.
makes it better,
I'm reviewing all of my systematic theologies as Tim is finding the question.
this one comes from my brain. So this is something I've seen being wrestled about on social media recently. It seems like recently there's a lot of tension on the interwebs between Protestants and Catholics about certain theologies. And so there's always the wrestle with this idea of purgatory. Is purgatory biblical? Is it not biblical? And I heard one person explain it as it's in the Bible, but it's not like what the Catholic sense. So he says purgatory is that time between when you die and your soul leaves your body, and you're either like completely sanctified or you're finished being judged and sent to hell. And that time between when your soul leaves your earthly body, by the time that you get to where you need to go, essentially, like the in between time that you're spending with God, either being judged or sanctified, is quote unquote purgatory. What would you guys say to that? And anything else you want to add about that subject?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I actually did a sprint on this, I think, last summer, and actually got quite a few comments and views on the purgatory. I mean, the short answer well, unless you want to answer it, what do you think?
I'm going to receive the ball and do a quick lateral.
Okay. Why don't I kick it off, and then you want to, because I forgot a couple of the Catholic nuances, if you can remember them.
Okay.
What was interesting about our conference is we had this Anglican guy, and we were going to have Al Mohler there. He wasn't there, but this would have been a great question to ask those guys. Anyway, the short answer is, purgatory is found in the Maccabees, which is the intertestamental period, are books that the Catholic Church accepts as canon, but Protestants do not, and that's where we find the kind of the basis for purgatory. Also, within Catholic theology, there's this idea that, and this is where I'm forgetting about the venial, the different sin stuff, but there's a purging after death that's going to get you into heaven later on. So that's very unique to Catholicism. That's not something we hold to. We think, after death, there's not a second chance. So that's why we urge people to come to Christ and receive forgiveness by grace through faith in the work of Jesus on the cross. And there, as we talked about with rich man and Lazarus, there's not a second chance. So, don't wait, or it'll be too late. So I don't know what else would you add to that?
Yeah, sure. So, like in the book of Maccabees, there's a story about a war, and there's people that have passed away in the war, and then there's a story about offering prayers for them. And so then you extrapolate from there. Why would you need to offer prayers for somebody that's already passed away? Perhaps they need prayer, and they develop sort of this theology of where do you go when you die? Where does your soul go? There's some verses like 1 Corinthians chapter 3, which talk about like a fire that purifies, and so they take like these verses that don't totally teach purgatory, but they construct this theology based on some second level inferences, and purgatory is a place to purge yourself of sin. And so they would say this: how dare you think you in your sin, in your unsanctified state, can just waltz into the presence of God right after you die? Of course there's more work to do. You're not ready. You're being sanctified in this life. That will continue after you pass away, and God will fully prepare you in holiness for his presence.
Right, but this is the big difference, right? So Catholics invert just sanctification and justification. So if you are sanctified, if you kill your sin, basically, then you'll be justified, whereas we would say justification is first, and our sanctification is in response to what Jesus did for us in our salvation.
Right. So they're saying the sanctification keeps going. After we pass away,
even after we die.
Right. Yeah. But
post-mortem sanctification.
Yes. Our response to that would be, no, how dare you think that the sacrifice of Christ and the imputation of his righteousness on my soul is not sufficient to make me right before God as I pass away and go into heaven. So we would reject the doctrine of purgatory because of some biblical verses that speak about, like Philippians chapter 1, to depart and be with Christ is far better, or 2 Corinthians 5, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. The thief on the cross, today you'll be with me in paradise. So these verses don't square well with a holding tank of purgatory that purges us from our sin. So we don't believe in that, and we don't teach that. So
we're
Steve,
covered by the blood.
To this
I just add, I can see
here?
how the Theology Sprint can produce some anxiety.
It does, man. Like, it purifies us from our sins.
You need to be. I'm praying for you. You need to be purified of that, Pastor Dave.
Yeah, I'm working on it, man. Tim's producing weekly anxiety in my heart.
All right.
That's okay.
Thank you, Tim.
It's making you better.
Wonderful. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the announcements. We got a few minutes before we got to head to staff meeting today to learn what other announcements there are. But what do we need to talk about? Do we have slides or no?
I don't have slides, so whatever you think needs to be announced.
Oh, man. All
well,
right.
we got a men's activity night coming up, and so we hope that you'll join us for that Friday night, and it's going to be great. We look forward to the men coming out and having a good time. We would encourage you fathers to bring your sons along to that event, and so that'll be coming up pretty soon. So that's on the docket. Shout out to the grads. Next Sunday is graduation.
This coming Sunday.
This coming Sunday is going to be a time to honor our high school and college graduates. So I happen to have one of those, and we're looking forward to
there you go.
Shouting out to the
I think there's a car wash that's happening. I was hearing they decided finally.
Car wash.
Do you know about that,
missions?
There will be a car wash. I believe it's the 22nd.
22nd. Yes, the day is the elder. Yeah, 22nd, June 22nd. There will be a car wash.
Yeah. So keep your car nice and dirty from now until June 22nd. We would like to clean that up for you, and you can help support the teen mission trip to the Dominican Republic. So come out for that.
I'm going to tell Johnny they should think about doing the car wash sooner during the pollen blast.
Yeah.
So people can get the green stuff washed off their cars.
You know, we might have an increase in sales because of that.
There you go.
New Jersey situation.
There you go.
Do they have pollen in Ecuador, or is that like a...
I mean, it's like the Garden of Eden. That's what I thought when I got there.
Wow.
Just like so green. It's the rainforest.
Okay.
So
they also have big mountains too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very mountainous. I went on a run, and I was running down the hill, and I was feeling pretty good. And then I turned around, and the altitude and the elevation, and I died.
Dave and I were talking about the first time I ever hiked a 14er in Denver. I was halfway up. I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
My head's spinning.
Yeah. I had to sit down for a sec.
You're not used to it. And they're even higher out in Ecuador. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, I think that's it, right? Any closing comments?
Hey, just wanted to say shout out to Steve and Gwen Anderson. Because you give generously at Millington Baptist Church, you're a part of the mission to this tribe in Ecuador. And so Steve considers you to be a partner, and that's a great privilege to come alongside of our missionaries. So when we have a missionary on the program, to me, it's like distinguished guests, roll out the red carpet. These are the people who are killing it for the gospel and the kingdom. So Steve, thank you for what you do, and thank you for generously giving. This is what God is doing through you, sending people from New Jersey, from our part of the world to a different part of the world with the good news of the kingdom. So Steve, thanks for all you do.
Thank you so much. I was just speaking on the parable of the talents yesterday, and I feel like the servant and the point of the passage that I was kind of gathering from that is it wasn't the servant's money. It was the master's money that he gave the servant the responsibility to steward. And so I'm just, thank you guys. I'm not taking that lightly. I want to steward God's resources well, and he's my master, and I want to be faithful with the resources that he's given us. So.
Amen.
That's wonderful.
So pray for Steve and Gwen.
Loved having you here, man. Thank you so much for sharing, and we'll look forward to some updates in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And if you're watching today, thanks so much for being with us on Behind the Pulpit. Again, subscribe to the channel, and you'll see all the content that's coming out. We'll be back next week with Dave Marks will be here next week, Pastor Dave. In person,
That's
like right
be
in between us.
show.
Dave Marks right here. So tune back in next week.
It's going to be our first 2-hour vehicle.
It's
Load up
that
on
guy's
the gas.
he's got some stories I'm looking forward to. So anyway, have a great week. We'll see you next week on Behind the Pulpit.